Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are on a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn. And of course, we couldn't do it without the founder of the Four Horsemen, the Hall of Famer himself, the enforcer, AA, Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
Doing excellent. Sitting here staring out my window at all the neighbors walking their dogs and just walking, period. And beautiful morning. Everybody's out getting some exercise and getting ready to head into the winter and into the abyss, as we know. So keep a positive attitude, keep doing all the things, wear your mask, social distancing, do something nice for somebody every day. Makes you feel good.
How about that? I like that we're getting like this, I don't know, higher level thinking version of Marty Lundy here on the show. I don't even know. I'm ready for you to like put on the black hat and spine bust the shit out of everybody. And instead you got little, peace and love messages this morning.
Well, when you get older, you figure out the real things that matter to you. I learned that being on the road year after year and missing every single event that your kids have growing up, that just sitting at the kitchen table having dinner every night, which is the highlight of our lives, but we're getting to be together and have dinner together. And that's something that never happened before. So very grateful for that. And it's a blessing in disguise.
Well, the other blessing in disguise is that we're back covering more WWE from 2015. This is really fun for me because I don't talk about the more modern era of wrestling on any of my other shows. So to talk about something from 2015, believe it or not, is a real treat. It's a real change of pace for me. And today we're going to be covering Hell in a Cell 2015. It went down October 25th at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California. 17,505 fans there. It's a legitimate sellout, turn away crowd. It's the 7th Hell in a Cell event. The first pay-per-view other than SummerSlam to be held in Los Angeles since No Way Out 2007. I've always been curious whenever the company sets up residency, so to speak. It feels like for a long time, SummerSlam was in LA every year. And then of course it moved back over to Brooklyn. We don't talk a lot on this show though about Los Angeles as a wrestling town. Do you think it's a wrestling town, or is it just a top 5 market for the country and therefore there's a lot of bodies there?
Well, and it's an entertainment capital, and all forms of entertainment are constantly putting their best foot forward in LA. And so, why wouldn't WWE? It's one of those deals that people will come out that aren't necessarily hardcore wrestling fans, but they're entertainment fans. And it's, as we know, the quality of the product, just wrestling in general will generate fans that, even if they're first time viewers, they want to come out and see what all the hoopla is about. And I think LA is, for SummerSlam all those years, it was just when we would go down to the beach and shoot footage of the talent down there having a good time and going to Gold's Gym and all the things that you do in LA. It was just a perfect setting. And LA is just an entertaining town and a town that wants to be entertained.
Well, they're ready to be entertained here. This is, the last, I guess 2015 was actually the last Hell in a Cell before the reintroduction of the brand extension, which happened in July 2016. So the next 2 years of the event will be show specific, but tonight's show is a super card by any definition. We've got Roman Reigns taking on Bray Wyatt. We've got New Day working with the returning Dudleys. John Cena's open challenge for the United States Championship. Charlotte Flair working with Nikki Bella. And of course the main event, Brock versus the Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell. Man, just looking at the lineup here, this is about as stacked of a card as you could have possibly had in 2015, right?
Yeah. And not a lot of fluff on it. Everything was pretty much had a direction and was built. The matches were built, and it feels pretty stout just hearing you read through it.
Well, it's going to be a fun time talking about the show, but before we do there, let's talk about some news and notes as we head into the event. There's a media event on October 27th where the UFC star Ronda Rousey said that her goal was to retire as UFC champion and then try to win a world title in boxing, a world title in jiu-jitsu, and then the WWE Divas title. And of course we know she's going to wind up skipping all of that, going straight to the WWE. It worked out okay. When you first saw or heard, hey, Ronda Rousey has even a passing interest in becoming part of our business and working in our industry, you had to know, hey, that's going to be a shot in the arm, because she is major box office and a legitimate draw in her other field.
When you are the face of the UFC or fighting in general as a female, that is huge. And that's not disrespecting males, females, anybody else. The fact is there are some real bad apples in that UFC. And even the guys just getting started, and the ladies for that matter, first tier fighters, once they get settled in and every day they're going to the gym and beating the piss out of each other, they're assassins, every one of them. Now you put somebody like Ronda Rousey, who is at the very top of her game, and you let her go out there and turn her loose, man, she creamed everybody. And she just became the face of it, the UFC and fighting in general and MMA, and God almighty, I was thrilled. And then when I found out, that she was a huge wrestling fan and a Horseman fan, I mean, it made me bow my chest out. That's for sure.
Somebody else who's bowed up a little bit is Dwayne Johnson. He's got a new endorsement deal that's announced in this era. This time it's with Under Armour, and, it's kind of a big deal because that's not the only thing he's got going his way. He just got the news that San Andreas was Warner Brothers' biggest grossing movie of 2015, pulling in $475 million worldwide. And he notes that unlike some of his other blockbusters, this wasn't a franchise movie or based on a book or a theme park. This is another banner year for The Rock, and it feels like the hits keep coming. Let's switch gears a little bit since we're talking about The Rock. Were you surprised that the XFL fell into his hands?
I'm not sure how to read that. If it was, if Rock's aspiration at one time and truly was to play pro football, and he just pulled up a little bit short, and I think his destiny pointed him in the right direction as far as wrestling. I mean, it's in his veins, it's in his heritage, it's in his, it's in his blood. But I think if that was his goal to play pro football, then this is another way to enjoy it. Certainly from the box, and I'm sure it'll be a luxury box, and complete, check that box in life, just get to be around pro football and and enjoy it. I think he'll be good. If it's possible to have a second league, he'll probably figure out a way to make it work.
Let's talk about some other news and notes heading in here. Paige is actually going to appear on the Conan O'Brien show on October 22nd. And the funny part of this appearance to me is the company, WWE, never plugs it on TV. And she's on there to promote Hell in a Cell, but it's a show where she doesn't even have a match. And, I don't know. I mean, I guess we know that the whole Fighting with My Family movie is going to become a thing, but you would think, I mean, for years and years, whenever you had one of your talent make an appearance on a late night show, that's going to be pretty big news for the company to get a mainstream rub. But of all the people to send, would you really send somebody not on the show to promote the show? Is this just a fumble from the PR department, you think?
Well, if I can't think of a reason that it was her, no disrespect to her, you can't think of a reason that it was her. It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
Right.
It feels like somebody woke up the day of the show and went, oh yeah, by the way, we need somebody for Conan. We'll send Paige. She's not doing anything. Everything should have been driving that show. Should have been Nikki Bella, or it should have been Charlotte, if you're going to go that route.
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't make, and nothing else makes any sense.
Let's talk about something that does make sense. Jerry Lawler is going to do an interview at a Comic-Con appearance, and he says there's a good possibility of SmackDown going live in January when it goes to the USA Network. And Meltzer would say there's at least been talk of starting out with a live special, and there's even been talk of the show moving to Tuesday and going live. It would increase costs somewhat, according to the Observer, and that kind of makes sense. He says live on Thursday wouldn't make as much sense, as it would be a huge cost increase, plus be somewhat worse for talent. The office would have to fly out to a new city twice a week instead of once. And that's why if it does go live, Tuesday would seem to work best. If you look at live versus taped numbers for Raw, the few times a year it is taped, the occasional live SmackDown specials, not to mention the live TNA shows, and the ratings never show a difference. I'm curious what your take on that is. And I want to talk about it, I guess, from two different angles. One, I think a lot of folks listening to this maybe don't understand how grueling the schedule was for the company back then. Of course, in the pandemic era, things are a lot different, but I think the typical idea would be you would, get home on Wednesday, and then you'd be home, Wednesday night, Thursday night, but then you're out somewhere working a show on Friday, a house show, and you'll work another house show Saturday, another house show Sunday. Then you've got a live Raw, then you've got a live SmackDown, but at least you've got 2 days at home, as crazy as that sounds, versus maybe the other way. If they had kept it on a Thursday, the talent would fly home on a Tuesday. They'd be home Tuesday night and maybe Wednesday night, but then back on the road on Thursday. It just feels like almost everyone and there's 2 tours here, by the way. There's the red crew and the blue crew. I don't know that the travel piece and how moving the trucks around and buying new flights for everyone, it made a lot of sense to go back to back on your production days. Did it not? Monday, Tuesday?
It's the only thing that makes any sense. You cannot send guys out. The only way that their schedule, the way they have it, is you have to tape SmackDown on Tuesday. You just have to. And then you got to give guys Wednesday and Thursday off. It's the only thing that works. So you start pulling, now think about this, you start pulling all those production people, back out to get them. They would have to go right back out on the Wednesday night to be there for Thursday. You have to go in a day early, and they're coming from all over the earth, to get there. It's a logistics nightmare if you don't go take Wednesday and Thursday off. It just is.
The other thing I want to mention is the attitude here that Dave says it doesn't really make a difference live versus tape as far as ratings. And I'm sure he's got that supported by all kinds of data. And maybe you weren't keeping those same kinds of records, but the audience, the feel, the show. Do you think live versus taped makes a big difference? Because I got to tell you, during the pandemic era, and I can only really there's been some WWE shows taped, but when I was watching AEW and it was taped, it didn't affect my enjoyment at all, but it does feel like for whatever reason, certainly with crowds, I get that's different, that live is really always the preference. And I think it might even be the preference for Tony Khan. Why do you think that is? Does live versus tape matter in your opinion?
Well, I mean, if it's a live to tape show, it's going to come across as just being live. If you got an audience in there and they're reacting to everything, and as long as you're not chopping that show up so that the people that saw it live, then they see it when it airs and they go, well, I never saw that happen. That's not that big a deal to me. I don't think live to tape versus live, and it'll clean up some of the little glitches that you need to clean up that way. Here's the one issue in the era of social media. When you do a tape show, there are people that are sitting there tweeting about what's going on the tape show. So all the secrets get let out of the bag. Then it becomes a little bit of an issue as far as people ruin it for themselves when they start tweeting out, the finishes and angles and all that stuff that happened before the fact. Because it's a tape show, it loses a little bit of its luster.
Right. Well, let's keep it going here. Let's talk about another piece of news that makes the rounds. WWE is going to sign William Shatner to narrate Breaking Ground. It's 10 episode documentary that's going to start airing on Raw right after Raw on Monday nights on October 26th. And Meltzer would say the show is patterned after Hard Knocks, the very popular reality show on HBO about the NFL. They're offering the first episode for free on both their Facebook and YouTube pages, which makes a lot of sense to do, using the episode to try and push people to subscribe to the network for the remaining episodes. The show will focus on the training and background of talent in NXT trying to get to NXT television and those on NXT trying to get to the main roster. WWE and Kevin Dunn are producing the show along with 3 Ball Entertainment, which is the company that does Bar Rescue, Catch a Contractor, Sweat Inc., etc. on Spike TV. And of course, Extreme Weight Loss on ABC. Shatner had a long running history of being involved in the WWE. Who in the office is a big fan of Mr. Shatner, or how does it just feels like a weird association to have?
I don't know. I really don't. I don't know what the deal is, but he's such a pleasant guy and a nice man. And, the Trekkies, he's a huge star in that, I don't know how many of those people transfer over to being wrestling fans. That I don't know, but I think he would be regarded as an A-list star. And, we were always struggling to get stars on the show for whatever reason, whether it be B or C class, they were all welcome. But I think William Shatner would be someone that would be an A-lister. So that would be the coup for the company. I'm not sure who had the relationship with him.
What about the Breaking Ground series? Did you see any of that?
I got to be honest with you. Again, priorities in those days, pounding the roads, pounding the airports. I never saw a one of them.
Let's talk about something else that makes the news and notes before we get out of here and get on the show. The reports, this is all from the Observer, reports that the first shot episode of the NXT Kids pilot show that we wrote about last week was surprisingly good. Basically, it's remixed NXT matches with Corey Graves as a babyface announcer working with 2 12-year-olds who are clearly not scripted and are weirdly entertaining, going off on different trains of thoughts while watching the matches. For example, while watching one of the women's from Australia wrestle, the kids start calling the woman Kangaroo Woman, and the kids and Graves go off on a tangent about kangaroos. They're also having the kids do interviews, and Graves is said to have done a real good job of holding the 30-minute show together. I got to tell you, I see how that could be entertaining for adults, but certainly fun for kids. And I think Corey Graves was probably the right guy for it. I wanted to put this in my news and notes here because I don't think, and maybe I'm alone in this, but I think Corey Graves is one of the very best announcers in the game right now. And I don't know that enough people really talk about it, but he obviously has the in-ring background. He has a cool look. It feels like he's, inside baseball enough and up on his stuff to where quote unquote smart fans can enjoy his work. But even if you're a casual fan, you could be into it. And somehow he checks Vince's boxes, and it feels like maybe years past, he would not have gone for someone with a unique look like Corey. He wanted more of an evening news type look on a guy like a Michael Cole. No disrespect to Michael, but you know what I mean? A more conventional look. What do you think of Corey's performance and how he does these days as an announcer for the company?
Well, I don't know these days because I don't watch, be honest with you. But I know it brought a different element, a younger element, just his appearance alone made you, pay attention. Um, and he appealed to a younger crowd. And I think you have to have a mix of different announcers that cover and check different boxes, just like you have talent. And Corey was a guy that, was opinionated. I don't know how much of those opinions were his own and those projected for him to have. But, I think he fits in with that younger demographic, and you're always wanting to grab that. That's for sure.
Let's talk about the show itself. It feels like everybody loved this one. The readers of the Observer included. They gave it 89.2% thumbs up, 0 votes for thumbs down, 10.8% votes in the middle. Pretty interesting to look back at a show 5 years ago and nobody had a thumbs down. Another thing that made the notes here is that security from the event were removing any Young Buck sign they could find. Of course, in this era, the Young Bucks are starting to gain some real momentum. They're selling a ton of merch. They've become a major draw for not only New Japan, but Ring of Honor, and of course, any independent. And this is their stomping grounds here. They're both from that part of the world in California, and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla helped really spread the word of what they were doing. But this is not news, right? For years and years, you guys, well, not just you guys, but all wrestling companies have had a little bit of a situation to handle with fans bringing signs that weren't exactly pushing the product, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I could never understand. To me, it wasn't that big a deal, jerking a sign, leaving a sign out there.
Who cares?
Yeah. By and large, there was decades that went by that the company didn't even recognize other wrestlers or other wrestling companies. They just didn't acknowledge it, no matter what you saw or what signs or whatever. It was, it just kind of, I could never figure out how that in America can even be legal to go snatch someone's sign that doesn't have profanity. It's not lewd. It's not anything that would not be, but PG or whatever your product was at the time. I don't even know how you do that.
Right.
But I guess because nobody ever contested it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it seems like to me it's not legal to do that. I don't know. What do you think? It's America, for God's sakes.
Yeah, it is interesting, when you think about freedom of speech and all that, but at the same time, I guess if you're signing up to be on a TV show, I don't know. Maybe we need to ask Dawkins about that sometime. Let's talk about something we do know. We've got a hell of a show here. Our first match is Dolph Ziggler, Cesaro, and Neville taking on Rusev, King Barrett, and Sheamus. And Stardust and the Ascension are sitting at ringside. They've got signs that says Stardust section to sort of spoof the Cesaro section. And they wind up actually playing no part in the match. But the match is really good. No surprise with this mix of talent here. They get 11 minutes and 33 seconds. Ziggler, Cesaro, and Neville pick up the win, 3.25 stars. Cesaro gives him the giant swing 16 times. Ziggler is going to land a super kick. Neville's going to hit the red arrow. Everybody gets to show off their fancy finish. Some really, really talented guys here. You watched it for the first time in 5 years. What'd you think?
Well, before the greed set in and every pay-per-view tried to be 6 or hours or whatever it was, you would have one match usually on the pre-show. And this, was a hodgepodge of some very talented guys. For the fans, they really lucked out. And Ziegler knew his role. He made everybody in the match look like a monster, every one of his opponents. He sold his ass off. But the highlight of the entire match is when Cesaro, who nobody seems to think is a star, maybe except me and the audience, went on a rant when he got that hot tag and came in. He was hitting those European uppercuts to everything that moved and walked, and the audience was all over it. I mean, he was hitting them on the floor, hitting them in the ring, and he just put on a display. And it was a classic example of a guy that had something over, and those lifters, those uppercuts were over, and he saved them for the right spot, and he creamed everybody with them. And it was very exciting for the arena. You know, all the guys were popping in the back. I know I was. It was a masterpiece.
A very good show. Go out of your way to see this match. It is weird though, to see that you've got Cody Rhodes sitting ringside, not doing a darn thing. How weird is it to go back and see Cody as Stardust now?
Well, they couldn't figure out anything for him to do. That falls in creative's lap. That's all you could figure out to create a buzz, put him in the Ascension, sitting in the crowd, and with no involvement at all, just maybe a cutaway, or at the most, I would suspect 2. That's about it. It just, it's one of those mysteries, but maybe it was the way it was supposed to be.
It all worked out. Next up, we've got John Cena doing his U.S. title open challenge. It's been a program that's going for several months at this point, and it's even been a fun TV segment. But today is the end of that open challenge because, well, when John makes the open challenge, and of course fans are having fun singing John Cena Sucks to his own theme song, Cena brings up the open challenge, and all of a sudden here comes Zeb Coulter out on a motorized wheelchair, the former Dutch Mantel. And he's going to introduce the man he represents. And no, it's not Jake Hager. It's not Jack Swagger. It is indeed a returning Del Rio, who gets a huge pop. Meltzer would note that he looks a lot bigger and more muscular than before. And, they're all over the place, man. This is a fun return. Fans are all over it. They're booing the Cena comeback. Del Rio gets the pin out of nowhere with the backstabber and the super kick. And we have on his return, a new United States champion. Alberto Del Rio wins. And I kind of love the idea of the open challenge segment. I was sad to see it end, but if you're going to ending it with a guy returning and a title change, well, that's about as cool of a way to do it. What'd you think of the way this was programmed and, Del Rio coming back?
I loved it. All kind of, interesting twists. Now, number one, there's a huge Hispanic population, in LA. So Alberto showing up, and it didn't get out. It didn't make any of the sheets. It wasn't, any of the newspapers. It was a surprise, and people love to be surprised. That's why I hate it when we just, give everything away, because people, that's why they tune in. They want to be surprised.
Yeah.
And that was a surprise opponent. And having Zeb Coulter, who was a pseudo, maybe behind the scenes, under the sheets, racist, a little bit was the character. To have him with Alberto, who is not an American or an American citizen, made right away for interesting, what ifs. And it just was such an odd situation, but successful. And to his credit, John did it the right way. If you're going to put a guy over, put him over. And he did. And I think the whole thing was a huge success.
I was a fan of the Del Rio character. Glad to see him come back here. What'd you think of the pairing though of him and Zeb Coulter? That felt a little, listen, I love Dutch. Don't get me wrong. I would love for us to do some stuff with Dutch one day, 'cause I think he's a hell of a storyteller, and God, he's been everywhere. He's forgotten more about wrestling than most of us listening to this show will know, me included. But I don't know about this pairing. Feels a little weird. What say you?
Well, number one, Zeb has the hairiest back that has ever graced the earth. He has got the indoor record for a mustache. Plus, he's smart and funny and very intelligent where the business goes. He has seen the evolution. He can explain it to you. He can bring back, things from old school and plug them into new school. That's what I thought was so interesting. Here, this guy is. On the surface, you think you got just some, Southern redneck that doesn't like anybody that wasn't born here, anybody that doesn't fly the American flag and all those type things, and here you have, your Mexican hero, and it felt like Strange Bedfellows, and it just opened up a lot of food for thought for me anyway.
The two top guys of the whole company in 2020 are facing off next here in Hell in a Cell. It's the big dog versus Bray Wyatt. This is sort of the pre-Fiend edition. And here's sort of the backstory of how we got here. At Battleground, Bray Wyatt defeated Roman Reigns with a little bit of help from Luke Harper. At SummerSlam, Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose would defeat Wyatt and Harper. At Night of Champions, Wyatt, Harper, and Strowman would beat Reigns, Ambrose, and Jericho. On the September 21st episode of Raw, Randy Orton would help Roman Reigns and Ambrose, easy for me to say, fend off an attack from Wyatt, Harper, and Strowman. And subsequently, Reigns would challenge Wyatt to a Hell in a Cell match, and Wyatt accepts. So here we are. They get 23 minutes in a Hell in a Cell. Meltzer would say that they work this at a 70s style pace, which is very slow, but they're doing this to try to make everything mean something. What a nice idea. Meltzer would say the moves were all modern, but it was just slow by modern standards. We've got some kendo sticks being used here, and the crowd is really into that. They're really trying to build the sympathy. I thought the match was pretty good. Meltzer thought the crowd didn't get into it until late in the match. 3.25 stars. What'd you think? I mean, the kendo sticks, the Sister Abigail's, and eventually we see Wyatt get thrown into an exposed stick in the corner, with the idea being that it hit him in the eye, and that allows Roman to hit the spear and the pin. I like these guys work here. It is a little weird to see a Hell in a Cell, the third match on the show, but other than that, I thought it was fun. What did you think?
Well, as you know, I'm not a fan of having more than one Hell in the Cells, because, they should be secluded for the hottest angle, the most vicious type match that there is. All the violence should be as top shelf as allowed, and within reason, so you don't get a couple of guys crippled, but it should be at a different level. But this is one of those times where both matches kind of had earned it.
Right.
And so it felt good to me that you had to, and they were going to be stylistically totally different anyway. And the one thing they did is, some people may think it was a slow pace, but you look at guys their size and strength and athleticism, you hit each other in the teeth with a kendo stick, or hit somebody in the back with a chair a dozen times. Those are still chairs. You're not going to be up moving too quickly as that progression develops. You should be getting weaker instead of stronger. And they made it a Hell in the Cell, top end, top shelf violence match. And they took their time and they sold everything. And when it was said and done, Roman had earned, a victory. But he got his ass handed to him for 20 minutes beforehand. And I saw the Wyatts and the Shield, and different combinations with another guy in the match like Jericho or Randy or all different combinations. And it was just really good and really creative, and they just meshed. And Bray and Roman on this night, they brought it, and I think everybody felt it and everybody enjoyed it.
I really dug it. I thought the work was good, but it does feel like a lot of fans were disappointed here. I think they were ready for Bray Wyatt to get the monster push. They wanted him to go over and become, sort of the tippy top guy. And we know that would happen years later. Do you think they made Bray wait too long, or could this have been the right time to go with him?
Well, being a guy that, I'm opinionated, but I have personal likes and dislikes, just like we all do. I always thought that Bray Wyatt, who had the most creative of characters,
Yep,
that he came up with it. It was a part of him deep down that lived in him. That's the reason he was able to pull it off. So it wasn't him playing a character, it was just a sliver of the real him amped up. And that's always the characters that get over. I felt like he had a firm grip on it. He was a big physical guy on top of that. But you got to win the big ones, Conrad. You have to win the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
And he went on a string of just, whoever's bright idea thought it was, well, this guy's, that character's over and he's doing a great job and he's a heel and you can beat him every pay-per-view. No, you can't. You should have been shoving him every pay-per-view and have that guy waiting at the end of the rainbow, if it was going to be a Roman Reigns, to pay it off with. But you got to go back and look at those records. And it was like, I know that he went like 0-6 or 0-8 at some point, something ridiculous. But you got to win. You got to win the big one.
It feels like, sometimes on Something to Wrestle, we would have conversations about guys like the Undertaker or guys like Jake Roberts, who had these really incredible gimmicks, for lack of a better word. And he would always say something like, oh, they didn't need a belt, because their character was going to be sort of bulletproof regardless of wins and losses. And that does say a lot about your character development and how good you are at doing that connecting with the audience and creating a character that resonates with them. But at the same time, it can almost be a curse, because it feels like that's the same type of brush that Bray was painted with, where they got a lot of losses on him, to your point. I mean, I remember that 0-8 stretch where you just know, oh, Bray's on pay-per-view. Well, he's losing. But I just, who's in his ear? Who's talking to the man behind the character about, hey, this is sort of the worst backhanded compliment you could ever get. So don't take it as a negative. Does he get sort of in his own head about his positioning on the card when he loses over and over and over? Or is that just not who he is?
Well, you get to a point where you have to start thinking about it. And the fact that if you go back, and you can go back just about and pull every one of those matches when he started that losing streak, and get some cutaways to the audience, get some reactions from the audience during the body of the match, and then get your reaction when the finish went down. And each time that he got beat, it was diminished and it went down, and it wasn't a big victory. When beating Bray Wyatt was not a big victory for one of our baby faces, you had to sit back in your chair and go, damn, I didn't think it's possible, but they've killed this guy off.
Right.
And you're talking about a horrible, horrible crime. A 300+ pound guy that can move like that with a gimmick like that and an entertainment just a creepy, scary crew around him. I mean, Big Red and Harper. Come on, you're telling me with those three guys in the zip code that you couldn't figure out a way to not beat Bray that many times? I mean, you got a fail safe. You got monsters wandering around everywhere. And if that continues to be the reason that he doesn't get beat, and they leave people laying every pay-per-view for 8 weeks instead of beating Bray for 8 weeks, you might have some hot heels.
Let me ask, do you think Vince McMahon, well, I don't know how to phrase it. Do you think Vince McMahon gets the Bray Wyatt character, or does everybody around him have to just sell him on it? Because this doesn't feel like something that's in Vince's wheelhouse.
Oh, I have no idea. You're asking an unknown that maybe doesn't have an answer. I know the audience got it.
Yeah.
And I know every single night and every house show, whether he was in the middle of his losses or his first loss or his last loss, it didn't matter. When those lights went out on the entrance and the music started, everybody in that arena had their cell phone light on. Now, if they didn't care, and I didn't look at that as being a babyface thing, it was a crowd participation thing because they loved his entrance. You know, they loved the character, and it was like a concert deal.
Yeah.
You know, when people go to the trouble collectively, thousands of them, to have their cell phone light on, they give a shit.
Yes,
so if you're in creative, Conrad, guess what? Pay attention to that.
Yeah. You should give a shit too. Let's talk about our next match. It's going to be one, that people look at in the future, I'm sure, because you've got two bona fide Hall of Fame tag teams here. Well, one of them's already there. It's the returning Dudleys. And they actually picked up a win at Night of Champions over New Day, but it was by DQ. So there's no tag title switch. And now we get a rematch here. On the way here, though, we managed to put Xavier Woods through a table on Raw. So we're going to work that as an injury angle. He's not here. In reality, Xavier is off to get married. But here we come. New Day is coming out with a broken trombone, sort of symbolic of their fallen brother. And they're going to call Bubba Ray the Caucasian Kamala. Start running around, patting their bellies, and the crowd's chanting New Day rocks. And they get going in the match. And at one point, Bubba can't help himself. He does the Kamala belly pat, but you know what's coming. New Day retains 8 minutes, 24 seconds. Kingston nails that, Trouble in Paradise. And that's all she wrote. I got to tell you, I know in hindsight, a lot of people would look at this as just a throwaway segment, but I love the Dudleys, and I thought it was so cool to see them come back and work with a modern tag team, even if it was, you know, even placement on this card, maybe in the popcorn match spot. This is such a loaded card that it almost feels like a SummerSlam more than a Hell in a Cell. And to see them working with New Day was fun for me. What'd you think?
Well, it was a chance to let the audience up and take a breath. You know, the Dudleys were established. People liked them. It was, it was nice seeing a blast from the past with the new guys. You know, the problem was at this point in time is the New Day were already starting to turn the audience in their favor. You know, they were so entertaining. They really weren't heels. But, you know, in this particular situation, Bubba and Devon played along with the whole gag with the Kamala thing. And it was just a chance to, okay, there's going to be a lot of violence tonight. I know that. Let's take a breath. Let's take a pause. Let's enjoy this. And they enjoyed seeing the Dudleys. It was a nice surprise for the crowd and a nice treat. I won't say surprise. I will say a nice treat.
It was a nice treat. Next up, we're leveling up women's wrestling. 2015 was all about that. I guess we should give you sort of the backstory. We're in the middle of the Divas Revolution, which I think happened. It really started to take shape after a 30-second match on Raw on February 23rd. People went online and started using the hashtag Give Divas a Chance. Fast forward, on July 13th. Nikki would claim there's no challengers for her championship. Out comes Stephanie McMahon, and she introduces Charlotte Flair. Well, she's not Flair at the time. Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha Banks. And we've got a whole little group now. Team PCB with Paige sort of leading the group. Very briefly, they called themselves the Submission Sorority. Somebody threw that in their Google machine and realized, wait a minute, that is an adult film reference. Maybe we should just go with Team PCB instead. Fast forward, these ladies become more cemented on the main roster, including on September 20th at Night of Champions. Nikki loses her championship to Charlotte, ending her reign at 301 days. And wouldn't you know it, that's just long enough to make sure that AJ Lee is no longer the record holder, since she and her husband CM Punk are no longer with the company. And tonight is the rematch from Night of Champions. It's Charlotte and Nikki Bella. They get 10 minutes and 39 seconds. All the women were banned from ringside. Meltzer would say it was the best WWE women's match on a pay-per-view in quite a while, and that Nikki pretty much carried the action, beating Charlotte down early. Of course, you know the story. Eventually Charlotte's going to pick up the win. 10 minutes, 39 seconds. Nikki gives Charlotte an Alabama slam to the ring frame, which couldn't have been fun. And then Nikki setting up that rack attack, but Charlotte reverses it into a cradle, locks in the figure eight, and that's all she wrote. She wins by submission. And after the match, Paige and Becky come out to congratulate Charlotte, and Paige shoves Lynch away so she can congratulate her first. 3.25 stars. You and I have had a lot of fun talking about how people slept on Nikki Bella. We thought that she had a great in-ring presence. Her forearms were legit. She looked like a legitimate athlete. Her stuff looked good. I really enjoyed her work, and I enjoyed this match. And we know that, you know, through a series of matches here at Night of Champions and again here, she's helping make Charlotte in a big way. What'd you think of this match?
Well, you know how I feel about, the Bellas, and I think they were underrated. Certainly, in this particular match, Nikki knew what she had to do. And I think, to be perfectly fair, when you're John Cena's girlfriend, the first thing, and I know the mind of the talent, she's getting preferential treatment. She's getting a push because she's John's girlfriend. There's all those things that you can say about her other than just look at the fact that she looks like a star. She works like a star. She is a star. And it was a passing of the torch that night. Nikki was one of your hottest commodities. And here you've got these three ladies. You got Charlotte and Becky and Sasha, who are something special. When the business all shakes out at the end of the day, 50 years from now, and they break open the capsule, you're going to say, well, that's three of the special ones. And, they were coming on the scene. They were fixing to make a huge splash, help make a huge splash. Let me put it that way. And I thought this match went a long way, not by having anyone get involved in it. It was a good contest. It was a good fight. And at the end of the day, Charlotte earned the win, but she had to earn it. And that's what our audience demands of our talent. They're okay to see you get a push as long as you earn it. It shouldn't be a gift. It shouldn't be something because you're somebody's girlfriend or somebody's boyfriend or whatever the deal is. It should just be the fact that you earned your way up. You've got talent. And on this given night, you had a changing of the guard. It was a little confusing why Paige was down there to me. That just didn't really fit story-wise, but, in the long run, didn't hurt anything. I just don't know that it helped anything.
Next up, we've got a match for the WWE Championship. At the Night of the Champions show, we saw Kane return from his injury, and he's back here as Demon Kane. He's going to attack Seth Rollins after Rollins retained the belt against Sting. At the network special live from Madison Square Garden, Demon Kane would attack Seth Rollins after Rollins lost to John Cena in a steel cage. And subsequently, Rollins was scheduled to defend his title tonight against Demon Kane. And the stip is, should Demon Kane lose, Corporate Kane, Kane's alter ego, would be fired from his role as director of operations. Kane's got a new mask here. They're going to go 14 minutes and 36 seconds. Seth Rollins gets the win. And, they try to do a little table spot on the Spanish announce table, but it doesn't break. And, they tease a count out, but Kane gets in at 9. Rollins then uses 2 springboard knees and 2 super kicks, followed by a frog splash, but Kane kicks out. Kane comes back, goes for a choke slam, and then Rollins kicks him in the chest and hits the pedigree for the pin. 3.5 stars. I liked Corporate Kane. I liked this switching back and forth. It was, as Bruce likes to say, a fresh paint of coat, not a fresh coat of paint, but a fresh paint of coat for Kane. You know, for a character that's been around that long, to still be showing sort of different facets of the character, I thought was pretty cool. What'd you think of this match? 14 minutes, 36 seconds. Seth retains.
Well, I wasn't a fan of Corporate Kane, so I'll have to beg to differ with you and Bruce on this one, just because when you've been made a monster to the degree that Kane had over the years, and the performance that he was able to give as a 6 foot, whatever he is, 310-pound guy, to go out and perform at the level he does, he's something special. I don't think you can float between being a suit and being a monster. It's a little bit out of my stretch of believability. Plus, when you got Kane out there doing physical things and fighting in a nice suit, and Kane dressed up really well. He looked corporate, looked like a monster part of the corporate, but he looked good. But if you've ever had to fight in a suit, you're a little bound. It's going to take away a little bit of the things that you can do physically. I just was not a fan of floating between the two, and the fact that we lost Corporate Kane as a result of a victory by Seth, well, it was like a blessing in disguise to me.
Next up, we've got the Intercontinental title on the line, and it's going to be Kevin Owens and Ryback. Boy, you can tell Ryback is not well liked here. Kevin Owens retains in 5.5 minutes. Ryback's going to try a press slam early, but couldn't lock him out. He also does a delayed suplex. Owens sets up a cannonball, but instead Ryback counters with a spine buster. The crowd is booing Ryback and cheering Owens, but everybody somehow gets into the feed me more chant. Ryback hits a power bomb. Owens kicks out. He hits the clothesline and goes for the shell shock, but Owens escapes and then hits the pop-up power bomb out of nowhere. And Meltzer would write, Ryback sold the eye like it had been poked. Too short. Star and 3/4. I can't wrap my head around this. I like both of these guys. I think they're both great performers. I thought Ryback had a good look and a good gimmick, and once upon a time he was one of the hotter stars in the company, and felt like the company, just as you likes to say, cut his water off too soon. But this pop-up power bomb at this point, thanks to John Cena, that's a made move. I guess I'm cool with Kevin winning from it, but it feels like we needed a little more time here. 5.5 minutes. What do you think?
Well, wasn't this a return? I think this was a return from a previous pay-per-view.
Right.
Same match. And I think the big mistake was they did the exact same finish. Poke in the eye, pop-up power bomb, which is not good. You could probably just figured out a way to get to the power bomb without having to poke him in the eye, but it just felt redundant to me. And again, you got to go back and look at, again, I go back and point out Kevin Owens' debut. He debuted with John Cena. The babyface reaction, and it was basically a small group that knew him from the Indies and knew him from NXT or whatever the case was prior to coming to the main roster, but he had a bit of a following. And then when the main audience saw the things, I mean, he's a bumblebee. He shouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that he does athletically. And I mean, he does some things that are just incredible. he should have been a babyface the very next morning. Some things should have changed and what they were thinking about. So, Kevin going into this thing, he's not a heel, which makes it difficult on Ryback. Ryback had gotten really hot with the merchandise sales and with starting to get hot with the audience. The Feed Me More thing was starting to catch fire, and he did get his water cut off, and I'm not sure why. Just didn't seem like a good business move at the time. But again, that was closed door meetings, something I wasn't privy to. I was just there to help, the guys on their matches and day to day things. But it just felt like guys were in the wrong position. It should have been Kevin the babyface, and maybe Ryback should have been the heel, or you had a different heel, or whatever the case may be. But if they reacted properly on the finish, that is your goal. And if you achieve that, you won.
Let's talk about our main event. This is going to be a big one. Of course, Undertaker and Brock actually had a Hell in a Cell 13 years prior to this. No Mercy in October of 2002. And of course, they had a feud in the early 2000s on SmackDown and did a little face off in the UFC when Undertaker was just in the crowd as a spectator at a Brock Lesnar match. But the big story is WrestleMania 30. Brock Lesnar defeated the Undertaker and ended the streak. No one saw it coming. Fast forward to Battleground 2015. Brock is about to defeat Seth Rollins for the world title, but the lights go out and there's the Undertaker and he attacks Brock Lesnar. They have a vicious brawl on Raw that requires literally everyone to separate them. They have a rematch at SummerSlam. Undertaker beats Lesnar, but in controversial fashion. The timekeeper ringing the bell after seeing the Undertaker supposedly indicating submission, since the referee hadn't seen a submission, never stopped the match, and it continues. The confusion allowed Undertaker to surprise Lesnar with a low blow and trap him in the Hell's Gate submission hold, causing Lesnar to pass out and giving the Undertaker the win. So Undertaker wins at SummerSlam, but Brock had the win at WrestleMania. This is the rubber match, the trilogy, the blow off, and they get plenty of time. 18 minutes and 1 second. Lesnar gets the win. Meltzer would say that Lesnar looked enormous, but Undertaker physically didn't look in nearly as good a shape as he did for SummerSlam. There's dueling chants from the crowd for Suplex City and Undertaker. Nobody wants to boo either guy. I think they really see that this is a big time main event, and they recognize both of these guys are big stars. It's got super heat far beyond anything else on the show, according to Meltzer. And Lesnar's going to bleed very early after being thrown into a post, and they even open the door to let the doctor get in, and he starts wiping the blood off of Lesnar's face and head, and it's just going everywhere. Quite the spectacle here. They pull out all the stops. If you're going to watch one match from this show, you should watch this one. The idea here is they're even going to Lesnar's going to undo the canvas, remove some of the padding, and the Undertaker chokeslams him right on the boards underneath the ring. He's going to go for a pile driver, and Lesnar's going to kick out, use a low blow from the times that Undertaker has given him a low blow, but he hits the F5 on the exposed boards, and that's all she wrote. Undertaker is down for a long, long time, and the fans are there with him chanting, "Thank you, Taker." He gets a standing ovation, 4 1/4 stars. In hindsight, you had to wonder, was Undertaker thinking this might have been his last match? In this era, he wasn't working often, and whenever he had a big match like this, you maybe wondered, is this the last time we'll see him? This has got to be one of his finest performances on the last leg of his career. What'd you think watching this main event from 2015?
Jaw on the ground, awestruck, respectful, almost remorseful that I knew his body was not in any condition to be putting it through what he did, but he's such a professional. He is such a showman. He has so much respect for the business. Hell in the Cell with Brock Lesnar is a nightmare in anybody's book. You know, it's like somebody rings your doorbell, you think it's the UPS guy, you open the door and there's a giant alligator coming in your front door. It's horror at its peak, and they took their time. They upped the violence. They made it a Hell in a Cell, and what a Hell in a Cell should be every time. And if you can't produce that quality, don't have a Hell in a Cell. And if you don't have one for 2 or 3 years, fine. And it was one of those things that you knew Taker was hurting. He wasn't going to let anybody else know that. And those guys, Brock Lesnar was a lot more qualified, savvy performer this time around than he was back in '02, obviously, when he was first starting. And he was a lot more seasoned. His timing was better. He has a lot of respect for Taker. I know that. Taker respects Brock as well. And it was one of those that at the end of the night, it certainly paid dividends.
Let's talk about the blood stoppage. Well, it's not a stoppage, but it wasn't part of the original plan. Meltzer would write, while Lesnar was bleeding badly, there was commotion at the gorilla position with Vince McMahon. Whether he was upset or putting on a show and acting upset for everyone else is a matter of conjecture, but he's the one who sent a doctor to the ring. The doctor was in there and tried to clean the blood off, but at one point Lesnar shoved the doctor. Neither Lesnar nor Undertaker were reprimanded or talked to by Vince McMahon or anyone about these incidents after the show. Lesnar had his cut taken care of and flew back home. Undertaker also flew home the next day. We're going to talk about the angle that happened after the match, but this whole blood situation, and Meltzer's not sure what to believe here. Was this, it feels like it was a legitimate cut and that Vince was concerned, but then, there is he shoved the doctor. So maybe they're just working. What say you?
Well, combination of both. If you go back and look, that's where Lesnar almost cut the post in half. I would hope if there's any blood mixed in with the ice water that's in his veins, that you would have probably saw some of that, because man, he hit that post on the dead fly. No, no trying to protect himself, no hands up to block some of that. He just ran through the post, and he was split wide open and he was bleeding. And the shoving the doctor was just something he felt at the time. It's just part of his DNA makeup. If I would have been the doctor, that would have been plenty for me. I would have found the exit to the door. But no, he, once it was established, people are going to get split open. People get hurt in this business. People get injured. That's the one part that drives all of us that have wrestled night after night after night and gotten hurt and got split open and, all these injuries. And, it's a rough way to make a living. And these guys, when you take it to the level they did, the fact that somebody got split open, it's really not surprising.
It's quite the spectacle. Go out of your way to watch it. What you'll see is at the end of the show, after the noise has peaked, the lights go out, the Wyatts come out, they surround the Undertaker, then they all attack him. They hold him down while Braun Strowman throws knees, and Wyatt beats on him until they carry him out of the ring on their shoulders. It's a great angle. And the next night on Raw, Bray Wyatt would explain that he wanted to claim the Undertaker's soul and obtain its powers. Of course, Kane then tries to attack Wyatt, but gets ambushed and attacked by the Wyatt family. We know what's coming. It's going to be the Wyatts versus the Brothers of Destruction at Survivor Series. And yeah, it sucks that we saw Bray lose here, but you're programmed right away with Kane and the Undertaker. Maybe he'll be okay. The company would address this whole bleeding situation. I want to put a bow on that. Meltzer would write, WWE sent out a statement after the show basically saying the practice of blading is banned, but sometimes there are accidental cuts. And Meltzer says, what I can say with 100% certainty is that the blood was not an accident. The coincidence of Lesnar doing it in the exact same spot and coming up bloody in the exact same way as in WrestleMania was not coincidental. Whether he hit the post and opened up his head or he cut himself, it was his intent to get blood. The idea that he took his right glove off and drilled the Undertaker meant the same thing. The question there is that typically when someone is looking to get hardway juice, a practice that went out of vogue in wrestling decades ago, the idea was short punches to the eyebrow where the skin and bone make it easiest to open up. The Undertaker bled from the forehead, the same spot where wrestlers would normally cut themselves. You know, listen, this is a little silly to me, and I can't believe we're even having this type of conversation. And I'm sure it makes you as an old school guy very uncomfortable, but God Almighty, if I had to choose between taking real punches to the head to bleed or just doing it the quote unquote old fashioned way, that's a no brainer. One could legitimately cause real injury and damage and repercussions. And once upon a time in the business, it was, Thursday. Tell me what you think about this hard way on purpose. I don't get it. Hard way on purpose. What?
Well, I'll put it to you as somebody that knows. He didn't have the option
Of old fashioned.
of the old way. Okay.
Yeah.
That got Dave Batista a huge fine. I think 50 grand or something. Ask him about that. And the reality is this: back in the day when we were performing magic and we were making everyone wonder if what they were seeing was real. Are these guys really pissed at each other? I know it's a show, but are they pissed? Hard way was one way that you convinced the audience, yeah, they're having a hell of a fight. And just like techniques, you can ask any boxer out there, hey, if you just solely want to knock a guy's eye shut, how would you do it? And I'm sure he could tell you. The reality is there's a sharp bone that it circles your orbital bone, that if you hit somebody really hard, the skin, you can feel it yourself, feel your eyebrow underneath. There's a sharp bone right there. And if you hit in a downward motion, it will split somebody's eye. Now, if you find that to be gruesome, you're right. You find that to be violent, you're right. And if it's somebody that don't know what they're doing and they're knocking the piss out of you everywhere but where that sharp bone, then you're going to get your eyes knocked shut anyway, and it's going to be really, really painful. But it is a way of producing the gore that is necessary in some matches, and it is a hard way, and that's why it's called a hard way, because it hurts, and you have to be a professional at it to be successful at getting it done without doing potentially a lot of damage. I mean, that's the eye area. Do I need to say any more?
No. What a show. Go out of your way to watch this one. I think it's one of the more, listen, I understand as time goes on, people always want to gravitate and talk about Royal Rumbles and SummerSlams and WrestleManias. But my goodness, Hell in a Cell 2015 was one hell of a show, especially this main event. Let's do some questions. We got tons of them. We can't get to all of them. Let's just do a few. By the way, we will be back next week, here on adfreeshows.com early and often. That's what we're doing. But next week it's, hashtag Ask Arn Anything. You already knew that. Every other week you get to pick Arn's brain, and next week is no exception. If you have a question for us, it's easy to participate. Just find our Twitter account at the Arn Show, and adfreeshows.com has got lots of fun stuff. Last month or 2 months ago now, I guess, we watched Arn's last major pay-per-view match, Halloween Havoc 96. Last month, Arn, we watched Chamber of Horrors 91, and we got to see some deep fried Abdul the Butcher. That was some silly shit. But later this month, Starrcade 87. It's going to be a good show. If you haven't already, join us over at adfreeshows.com. Let's jump into some questions about this show, though. Hell in a Cell 2015, and we'll wrap it up. Jeremy wants to know, why do you think the company didn't turn Roman heel way sooner? He's a heel now, and I absolutely love it. It's getting positive reactions. Do you think they see it now and maybe wish they'd done it sooner?
Can I backtrack and just have one comment on the main event of the Hell in a Cell?
Oh, please do.
before we move forward, because, I catch myself, you know, coming across as a bitter Monday morning quarterback and, having negative comments. I do not want the WWE to not be successful. And on that given night, they did something that Vince, for years and years, was famous for. They came out of that pay per view with a huge victory for Brock Lesnar and a brand new angle for Bray Wyatt and the Wyatts and the Undertaker. So they came out of that with a brand new angle, and they were, the company wise, they were stronger than when they went in. It was a grand slam, I thought, that show. All the talent, everyone that produced it, everybody in the truck did an incredible job. And that was one of those shows that if you want to hold up and have your banners and streamers and confetti fall and go, this is what they do, that would be a good show. I don't want to come across as some bitter guy that has a vendetta. I do not. We get caught up in Monday morning quarterbacking a lot of things. I just want everyone to be certain. I want to see every wrestling company, independent and all the way to the top, flourish and do well and provide jobs for a lot of people that want to make a living in this wonderful industry. And I want the fans to have all kind of options that they can either choose to look at or not. And I just wanted to finish with that. Kudos to everybody. That was a great effort.
Really a remarkable show. The question about Roman though, what do you think? I mean, listen, I think it's one of those deals where I think the company would take the approach that, hey, the heel turn for Roman is working best now because we made you wait for it. What do you think? Did they wait too long?
Well, yeah, when you're having them, when you're writing promos for them, and you're having a guy like Roman Reigns, the beast that he is, and the intelligent guy that he is, the athlete that he is, the accomplished worker that he is, saying stupid shit like suffering succotash. I think there were a lot of mistakes made along the way. You have to recognize, and when you have a special talent come along, and it was clear to everybody, Roman was a star. He walked in the room, every woman in the joint was turning their head. Every guy was going, Jesus Christ, who is that guy? When you have somebody special like that, you have to have a goal and a game plan for him. And he should have stayed a heel from the days of the Shield. And when they were first brought aboard as heels, you could have turned the other two guys. You should have singled Roman out, but as a heel. And he could have stayed a heel all this time and have one turn at the proper time that mattered. Because when you flip flop your personality and your characters and your quote, heel or baby face, good guy or bad guy, so many times back and forth, people can't trust you. They can't trust a word you say on a promo because last week they loved you. This week they're saying, shut up. And it diminishes your credibility. And when you have credibility with the audience, you're halfway there. And I think he should have stayed a heel, had one massive turn to turn him babyface. And now you got something. And I'll point to one guy that is the shining example of that. Hulk Hogan was a babyface his entire career. When he turned that day and went NWO, it was the shot heard around the universe. And it inflamed the entire industry. Roman could have been the same. You could say better late than never, but if they, people also argue, Conrad, okay, it's not black hat or white hat, everything is shades of gray. Do you think that's great? Does anybody think that's brilliant? I don't. I want to know where a guy stands and what his motivations are. How does he feel about everything? So I can figure out if I like him or not. If he's gray, you're never going to get a direct answer.
Captain Zach wants to know, do you think at this point in Undertaker's career that he was seen as a legitimate threat to Brock, or do you think this match was booked more as a spectacle?
I think on any day, Undertaker's a threat to anybody just because of the strength of character, his resume, who he is, and the fact that he has that supernatural flavor to the character itself. It allows you to suspend your disbelief. And when he could pull it off physically, nobody in the building questions that what they just saw wasn't so.
Well, that's going to wrap us up here for Hell in a Cell 2015. If you're going to watch one match, go out of your way to watch that main event. It is a spectacle, to say the least. And next week, we're back at you with another hashtag Ask Arn Anything. You would have gotten all of these shows early and ad-free had you signed up over at adfreeshows.com. We're having such a fun time right now with all the new content we've rolled out, including there's going to be video of this podcast. Now, today's episode wasn't video, but one day, very, very soon, you'll be able to choose between the video version or the audio version. And we're going to continue to bring you more than your money's worth every single week here at adfreeshows.com. If you've got a question for next week's show, it's easy to ask. Just go follow us on Twitter at The Arn Show. I am at Hey, it's Conrad, and we are out of time. We'll see you next week right here on Arn. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.